My name is Jessica Monroe. I'm 36, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family disappointment. The Monroes live in Greenwich, Connecticut, which tells you almost everything. Old money, country clubs, Ivy League diplomas framed bigger than family photos, and the kind of conversations where people casually complain about the wait list for their ski lodge in Aspen. My father, Richard, is a corporate attorney who never lost a case worth more than $1 million. My mother, Patricia, comes from one of those families that don't need last names because they already own half the town. They don't say it out loud, but I was supposed to be their next golden child. Too bad I decided to wear combat boots instead of pearls. Then there's my sister, Amanda. 3 years older, Harvard Law, married into Boston real estate money, 2 kids in private school, and a vacation place in the Hamptons she just can't shut up about. She's basically the living brochure of what my parents wanted. Amanda doesn't just play the part, she leans into it like it's Broadway. She's perfect on paper and knows it. At every dinner, she makes sure I remember. You see, I picked a different path. While Amanda was busy memorizing Supreme Court rulings, I was busy memorizing how to field strip an M4 at West Point. That was the first scandal. My parents acted like I'd joined a cult. At every family gathering since, Amanda has played prosecutor, and I've been the defendant. My career in the Army has been Exhibit A, in her case, that I never lived up to the Monroe standard. The last time we were together before the big anniversary dinner, Amanda was showing off pictures of her kids at some exclusive camp. She leaned across the table and said, "So Jess, how's life in the barracks? Still folding your own laundry?" That's her style, never a knife to the chest, always a smile with a jab hidden behind it. My parents laughed politely. Not at the joke, but at the reminder that Amanda was winning. I just sipped my drink and pretended not to care. That's the thing you can get used to being underestimated. After a while, the digs almost feel predictable. When are you getting serious about your future? When will you stop chasing things that don't pay off? Isn't it time you settled down with someone respectable? My mom asks those like she's reading off a checklist. Amanda just turns them into sport. The cruelest part is they do it with manners. No screaming, no public fights. Just constant reminders that in their eyes, I'm behind. Greenwich dinners are their own sport. Perfect table settings, imported wine, and some story about Amanda's latest case or property deal that gets applause like she just cured cancer. The family doesn't just gather to eat, they gather to measure. Who's buying, who's winning, who's climbing. I learned early that I'm the yardstick for what not to do. My father even once told a family friend, right in front of me, "Amanda followed the path. Jessica likes to experiment." Experiment, like I'm baking cookies instead of leading soldiers through combat zones. But nothing beats Amanda's timing when she smells blood in the water. One dinner, she asked if the Army had real retirement plans, because she read an article about veterans struggling. I kept chewing, trying not to choke. She wasn't asking because she cared. She was asking to remind everyone that I wasn't climbing the same ladder. That's the Monroe way, subtle humiliation disguised as casual conversation. The build-up to our parents' 40th wedding anniversary dinner was like preparing for a trial I already knew I'd lose. Amanda called me the week before, voice full of sugar. "Jess, don't feel like you have to bring anything too fancy. Just your presence is enough." Translation: she would handle the champagne and caviar, and I could stick to gas station wine. My mom added her own sting. "You're still in that apartment, right, dear? Oh well, we'll seat you near the cousins. They'll be happy to hear about your adventures." Adventures, that's what they call deployments now. I drove up to Greenwich that night with a bottle of wine worth more than the car I was driving, but of course it didn't look the part. That's how you survive in this family, you know, you're being measured even when no one says a word. I parked behind Amanda's shiny Range Rover, took a deep breath, and reminded myself I've been shot at in Afghanistan. Surely I could survive another Monroe dinner. Inside, everything was exactly as expected. My father held court near the fireplace. Amanda stood with her husband like they were posing for a lifestyle magazine, and my mother floated around making sure everyone noticed her navy blue dress. I could already feel Amanda's eyes scanning my outfit before she opened her mouth. "Jess, you made it," she said with that fake hug. Then the dagger. "That top looks familiar. Didn't you wear that at Christmas 2 years ago?" Everyone heard it. Everyone pretended not to. That's how it works here. Dinner started with the usual toast. My dad raised his glass. To 40 years with the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Glasses clinked, and my mom smiled like she was still in a bridal catalog. Then came the add-on. And to our daughters Amanda, who has brought us such pride, and Jessica, who has followed her own path. Translation: one's a winner, one's the family experiment. I smiled and took a long drink. By the second course, Amanda was in full performance mode. She went on about her children's achievements at their private school, then slid in a line about how tough it must be to work in such a demanding job with so little pay. My mom sighed like it was tragic. My dad nodded like he was considering a charity donation. That's when Amanda turned directly to me and asked, "So Jess, do you even think about retirement? Or are you planning on staying government dependent forever?" The room fell quiet. Forks paused midair. She smiled sweetly, pretending it was just sisterly concern. I could feel every eye at the table waiting for my answer. And for a second, I wanted to snap back with everything I had bottled up over the years. But I didn't. I just shrugged and said, "Don't worry about me, Amanda." Then I went back to my plate. On the surface, it looked like she'd won. In reality, I was just biding my time. I gripped my fork tighter, letting the silver edge press into my palm until I felt calm enough to breathe. That's the trick I learned at West Point. Control the reaction before it controls you. It's where everything started, really. The day I told my parents I got my acceptance letter, Amanda's face said it all. She laughed and asked if West Point was that army school where people just learn to march. My dad corrected her. He knew damn well what it was, but his tone was more annoyed than proud. He had pictured Yale or Princeton, maybe Stanford if I was feeling adventurous. Military wasn't even on the list. West Point wasn't a fantasy. It was brutal, and that's why I chose it. Every day was designed to break you down until you learned how to rebuild yourself stronger. The first morning, my boots felt like they weighed 20 pounds, and my bunkmate cried herself to sleep after lights out. I never told my family how much I wanted to quit. Not because I didn't think they'd care, but because I knew Amanda would savor it. See? I told you she wasn't cut out for it. That line lived in my head during every long run, every freezing drill, every time I thought about packing up and going home. By the time I graduated, I wasn't the top of my class, but I had grit. That mattered more to me than medals or speeches. To my family, though, grit didn't translate. Amanda was giving her commencement address at Harvard Law, shaking hands with senators. I was saluting, promising to serve, and my parents clapped politely like they were at the wrong ceremony. They told friends, "Jessica is exploring military service," like it was a gap year before grad school. That was their way of softening the blow of having a daughter in uniform. Deployment to Iraq came quick. No easing in, no training wheels, just sand, heat, and the constant hum of helicopters. At first, I thought I'd drown under the weight of responsibility. Leading people younger than me, some barely out of high school, who trusted me to make the right call. It hits different when the wrong call means someone doesn't go home. I learned fast. You don't have the luxury of self-doubt when there's an ambush waiting outside the gate. I wrote home sometimes, but what do you even say? "Hi, Mom. Today we drove through an area with IEDs, and by luck, nobody blew up. Hope Amanda's kids liked soccer camp." I stuck to safe details. "The food's terrible, but I'm fine." My mom would write back about charity luncheons and Amanda's growing list of achievements. Once she slipped in a line, "Amanda's firm is already looking at her for partner." Not a word about asking if I had slept in a bed that week. Calls were worse. Bad connections, static buzzing, my dad asking when I planned on coming back to real life. Amanda once picked up during a family call, laughing in the background. "Hey Jess." Still crawling around in the sand? She was half joking, but she knew exactly what she was doing. Every reminder that I was different was fuel for her. She measured her success by how far below her I sat at the table. But the thing about combat, it changes how you process insults. Once you've had bullets snap past your head, Amanda's digs about paychecks or apartments stop cutting as deep. You just smile, let her believe she's winning, and wait. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. No matter how much grit you have, when it's your own family writing you off, you feel it. There was one night in Iraq that stuck. We were running a convoy, just supposed to be routine. We hit small arms fire halfway through the route. Chaos. My driver panicked, hands shaking. I grabbed the wheel and kept us moving. We got out without losing anyone, But I sat up all night after, staring at the ceiling of the tent thinking, would my family even care if I hadn't made it back? I knew the answer. Amanda would have turned it into a cautionary tale at her next dinner party. See, this is why she should have gone to law school. That thought hardened me more than any drill sergeant ever could. By the time my second deployment came, Afghanistan this time, I didn't need anyone's validation. I trusted my team, they trusted me, and that was enough. Family pride was a luxury I didn't have. Out there, pride was getting everyone back alive. But even so, there was always that faint echo in my head. Amanda's voice, my dad's dismissive tone, my mom's sigh. It wasn't just about proving myself as a soldier. Somewhere deep down, I wanted to prove them wrong. I remember landing at JFK on leave once, walking through arrivals with my uniform bag slung over my shoulder. Families around me were holding signs, balloons, kids running to hug their dads. My parents weren't there. Amanda sent a text. Congrats on surviving another tour. You should think about settling down. Like she was doing me a favor by reminding me I wasn't living a proper life. I took the train back alone, sat by the window, and thought about how different we really were. It wasn't all bitterness. My unit became my real family. Guys from places like Nebraska and Texas who never had money but would give you the shirt off their back. We had inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. Rituals before missions that kept us sane. Those bonds made me realize that the Monroe way of measuring success was broken. They thought prestige was about titles and addresses. I learned prestige was keeping your people alive. But try explaining that over Thanksgiving turkey in Greenwich. There's one dinner call I'll never forget. I was sitting in a tiny rec room overseas, plastic chair, phone pressed against my ear. Amanda was celebrating her promotion to junior partner. She went on and on about the new house they were buying, the Hampton Summers, the client she was landing. Then she asked, "So Jess, what exactly are you doing these days? Guarding sandbags?" The room went silent because my squad could hear her through the static. I laughed it off, said, "Yeah, something like that." Inside, though, I swore I'd never forget that moment. Not because she was cruel, but because it was so damn predictable. The Army gave me scars, literal ones and invisible ones. Nights where I woke up sweating, mornings where I questioned if I could do another day. But it also gave me a backbone. My family never noticed. They only saw the surface. Messy hair, tired eyes, simple clothes, no ring on my finger. Amanda paraded around in designer outfits while I showed up in my uniform or whatever I had clean. To them, image was everything. To me, image meant nothing. Still, every time I sat across from Amanda at that glossy dining table, hearing her polished laugh, watching my parents beam with pride, something deep in me burned. I wasn't jealous of her life. I was angry that they decided mine didn't count. And that anger never disappeared. It just waited. The first thing that hit me was the smell of burned rubber and dust, then the screaming. Afghanistan wasn't like Iraq. It was rougher, colder, and the mountains made you feel small even before the enemy started firing. That day, our patrol was moving through a narrow valley when the first shots cracked. Bullets pinged off metal, and the sound was so sharp it cut straight through my helmet. Training kicks in quick duck, return fire, check your people. But the truth is, nothing prepares you for the chaos of an ambush. I remember seeing Private Lopez go down. He was 21, still talked about his mom's cooking every night like it was waiting for him back home. He was bleeding bad, too close to the open ground. My brain said wait for cover fire, but my body didn't. I dragged him out, rounds snapping past like angry bees. My shoulder caught a piece of shrapnel, hot pain shooting down my arm, but I kept pulling until he was safe behind a truck. The medics took over. I just sat there, shaking, pretending it was the adrenaline and not the fear. When it was over, we counted heads. Everyone made it. Lopez lived. They told me later I saved his life, but all I could think was how close I'd come to not making it back myself. That's when I realized scars aren't always medals. Sometimes they're just reminders that you got lucky. Recovery wasn't glamorous. I spent months in a military hospital with a sling on my arm and a parade of doctors checking in like I was a project. Nights were the worst. The quiet left space for every noise from that ambush to replay in my head. Back home, Amanda was making headlines for some big case win. My mom sent me the article, clipped neatly from the newspaper, no note attached. Just the proof that Amanda was still the one worth bragging about. Bills stacked up even while I was recovering. Sure, the VA covered some, but not all. I had food stamps for groceries, something Amanda never let me forget. She didn't say it outright, but she didn't have to. Every family dinner turned into a courtroom where she was the prosecutor and my life was the punchline. Thanksgiving was the worst. I showed up, still stiff from physical therapy, uniform a little too tight on one side because of the bandages underneath. Amanda had just come back from Paris. She dropped it casually into conversation. Paris was beautiful, but honestly, traveling with kids is exhausting. Everyone leaned in like she was giving a TED Talk. Then she looked at me and smirked. Jess, at least you don't have to worry about that. The government feeds you, right? The table went dead quiet. My father cleared his throat. My mom adjusted her napkin, pretending not to hear. Amanda sipped her wine like she'd just scored a point. I wanted to throw the whole damn turkey at her. Instead, I kept chewing, staring at the cranberry sauce so I wouldn't have to look at anyone. That silence from my parents cut deeper than Amanda's joke. They didn't defend me because they agreed. Or worse, because they didn't think I was worth defending. Those dinners became routine. Amanda flaunted vacations, cars, her kids' private school achievements. I brought nothing but the wrong kind of stories. War stories don't fit well between salad and dessert. Once I started to talk about Lopez and the ambush, Amanda cut me off. Spare us the gore, Jess. We're eating. Everyone laughed nervously, and I shut my mouth. That's how you learn which stories are allowed in your own family. Money was always the quiet judge. Amanda and her husband bought a second home in the Hamptons. I was living in a small apartment outside D.C., trying to stretch every paycheck. I drove a car that coughed more than it ran. Amanda's husband once joked that my car was a vintage model, and Amanda added, "Yeah, vintage like her career." My mom laughed that time. That laugh still stings. But if you think humiliation breaks you, it doesn't. It hardens you. Every insult Amanda threw was fuel. Every look of disappointment from my dad was another log on the fire. The more they saw me as less, the more determined I became to prove them wrong. Not to them because, honestly, nothing would change their minds, but to myself. I had already faced death. Facing Amanda at dinner was just another battle. The physical therapy dragged on, but I refused to quit. The army doesn't hand out sympathy, and I didn't want it anyway. I pushed until I could lift my arm again, until the scars didn't stop me from putting on my uniform. I wasn't done. The battlefield had taken its shot, but I wasn't finished fighting. Amanda, of course, had no idea what any of that meant. To her, recovery was a spa retreat, not months of sweating in a rehab center. She called once, out of obligation. "So, you're back on your feet yet? Good. Maybe now you can think about a normal job." Normal. As if saving lives in a war zone wasn't normal enough. I didn't argue. I never argued with her. That was the power play. Let her think she'd won while I was quietly preparing for the next round. The army sent me back, this time stateside, but I carried Afghanistan in my bones. The scars itched in the cold, the memories didn't fade, and food stamps still sat in my wallet. Amanda never asked how I was sleeping, or if I was okay. She only asked if I was planning to do this forever. My parents never pressed either. They liked simple answers, and mine never were. What they didn't see was that every scar was building me into something stronger. Every jab Amanda threw was proof she underestimated me. That would be her biggest mistake. Walking back into uniform after Afghanistan wasn't the same as before. My body healed, more or less, but I carried that ambush with me. The army noticed too. Instead of shipping me out again, they sent me to a new assignment at Fort Meade, home of the U.S. Cyber Command. At first, it felt like exile. No desert, no patrols, no dust in my teeth. Just fluorescent lights, endless screens, and rows of analysts who looked more like IT guys than soldiers. But that's where the real war was shifting. You don't need mortars or bullets to cripple a country anymore. You just need a laptop and someone willing to burn the world down from behind a keyboard. And let me tell you, the people on the other side were damn good. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, you name it. They didn't care who got caught in the middle, and they didn't take days off. Most people in my family had no clue what Cyber Command even did. If I told Amanda I was tracking state-sponsored hackers trying to crash a hospital system, she'd probably ask if I could fix her Wi-Fi while I was at it. To them, it wasn't real soldier work. But behind those monitors, we were fighting battles nobody wanted to admit existed. The adjustment was brutal. Combat is loud, immediate, visceral. Cyber warfare is quiet, constant, like standing guard in the dark waiting for someone you can't see to make a move. My day started before dawn and ended long after normal people had gone home. I lived on coffee and vending machine pretzels, staring at lines of code that felt like another language. It wasn't glamorous, and it sure as hell didn't impress anyone at Thanksgiving dinner. Still, I got good at it. Maybe it was all those nights I spent as a kid tinkering with computers when my family said I was wasting time. Funny how the waste of time became the very thing saving lives. I started spotting patterns faster than most. Little anomalies that hinted at something bigger. One day it was a phishing attempt against a small bank. Another day, it was a backdoor into a defense contractor's systems. My reports started getting attention, and suddenly I was in meetings with senior officers, briefing them on threats that could have made headlines if we hadn't stopped them. Of course, none of that translated at home. My dad would still ask me if I'd thought about retirement planning. Amanda would lean back in her designer dress and say, "So basically you're still behind a desk, right?" Meanwhile, the desk I was behind was keeping foreign operatives from draining American power grids. But sure, let's talk about her new house in Cape Cod. I learned to stop explaining. Explaining was wasted breath. They didn't want to understand. They wanted me to fit into their idea of what mattered. Titles, promotions, flashy proof of success. Cyber defense didn't come with parades or medals you could hang on the wall. The victories were invisible. No one claps for a disaster that never happened. Inside Cyber Command, though, the work mattered. My team pulled 16-hour shifts, chasing down threats that could have shut down air traffic control or stolen millions of military records. We weren't names in the news, but we knew the scoreboard. Every breach we blocked meant Americans who never realized how close they'd come to chaos. I remember one night in particular, staring at a cascade of network logs when I noticed something off. A strange packet flow bouncing through servers in Eastern Europe. It looked random at first, but the longer I stared, the more it felt intentional. I flagged it, traced it, and sure enough, it was a coordinated attempt to compromise military supply chains. We shut it down before they got in. If they had succeeded, troops overseas could have been cut off from critical equipment. No headlines, no thanks, just a quiet, good catch from my supervisor and back to the grind. That's what the silent war was. Constant, invisible, thankless. And honestly, I preferred it that way. Out there in my family's world, everything was show. Appearances. Perceptions. At Cyber Command, results spoke for themselves. No one cared if you drove an old car or wore the same boots for 3 years. If you stopped the breach, you mattered. Still, the family dinners didn't stop. Amanda kept taking swings. "Jess, are you still single? You know, it's not too late to think about alternatives." Alternatives meaning quitting the army and marrying someone she approved of. My dad would nod like she'd made a reasonable suggestion. My mom would refill Amanda's wine glass and change the subject. No one asked me what I was working on or if I was proud of it. That silence said it all. The funny thing is, silence can be power too. I stopped defending myself at those dinners. Every time Amanda threw out a jab, I let it hang there, unchallenged. Let her think she'd won. She didn't realize the less I said, the more I was learning about her, about my parents, about how small their world really was. They thought they were looking down on me. In reality, I was the one looking at them, finally seeing the cracks in their perfect facade. At Cyber Command, we had a saying, "The best fight is the one nobody ever knows about." That became my motto outside of work too. Let Amanda laugh. Let my parents sigh. I didn't need them to know the details. I just needed to keep doing the job that mattered. And so I lived between two worlds. By day, I was tracking hostile code across the globe, keeping lights on and planes in the sky. By night, I was the family disappointment who apparently couldn't keep up. The contrast would have crushed someone else. For me, it was fuel. Every dismissive comment from Amanda was another reason to keep pushing. Another reason to fight harder in the quiet spaces where the real battles were happening. What none of them realized was that every small win at Cyber Command was stacking up. The reputation, the trust from higher-ups, the track record, it was all building towards something bigger. Something they wouldn't be able to laugh off at dinner with a snide comment. And as much as I tried to ignore Amanda's digs, I couldn't shake the thought that one day she'd choke on her wine just like my dad did when the butler brought in that magazine in someone else's story. Only this time, the reveal wouldn't be about a billionaire CEO. It would be about me, the sister they never thought would amount to anything, standing in a spotlight none of them could control. The smell of my dad's favorite cigars hit me before I even walked into the house for his birthday. The Monroe estate hadn't changed in decades. Same polished floors, same chandelier that Amanda liked to brag was imported from Italy, same air of judgment waiting at the door. I carried a modest gift bag, a good bottle of whiskey, not the flashy kind Amanda would show off, but something I knew Dad actually liked. It didn't matter. By the time I stepped into the dining room, Amanda had already claimed the spotlight. She was holding court about some major case she'd argued in federal court, her voice sharp and polished, like she was delivering closing statements. The jury practically applauded, she said, sipping her wine like a victory lap. My parents nodded, hanging on every word. I put the whiskey on the side table unnoticed. "Jessica," my mom finally said, acknowledging me as if I were a late arrival to her private club. "How's work?" The way she said it, I could feel the subtext. Is it still the same low-level desk job? Are you still wasting your potential? It's busy, I said simply, taking my seat. I didn't bother explaining that my team had stopped a cyber intrusion on a defense contractor last week that could have jeopardized millions of dollars of equipment. That kind of thing didn't translate over steak and salad in the Monroe household. Amanda smirked, her fork poised like a weapon. Busy? That's good. At least you're keeping occupied. Some people get stuck in roles with no future, you know? The jab slid across the table and landed squarely on me. My father chuckled softly, like she'd just made a clever observation. I clenched my jaw but kept chewing. Losing my temper was what Amanda wanted. Her whole game was control. She framed every dinner as a trial, where I was the defendant, and she was both prosecutor and star witness. Bradley, her husband, leaned back in his chair, smug as ever. "Jessica, have you thought about what's next? I mean, you're not getting any younger. Maybe law school? Something more stable?" He said it like he was offering career advice to an intern, not addressing a woman who had seen combat. "I'm fine where I am," I replied evenly. My scars still burned in the cold, but I wasn't about to show weakness in this courtroom Amanda built. Amanda jumped in before I could take another bite. "But do you really see yourself doing that forever? Sitting in some basement staring at computer screens? I mean, come on, Jess. Don't you want a life?" My mom nodded gently, pretending it was motherly concern. My dad swirled his scotch, staying silent but not defending me. Their silence always cut deeper than Amanda's words. Dinner carried on like that, one jab after another dressed up as advice or concern. Amanda listed off her kids' achievements: piano recitals, soccer tournaments, a science fair win that she somehow made sound like a constitutional victory. My parents applauded each one. When it came back around to me, the silence was deafening. I broke it once, saying, "My team stopped an attack on a federal system last week. That was as close as I could come to sharing something real." Amanda tilted her head, feigning interest. "Oh? Like hackers? Cute. Well, I guess someone has to do that." Then she dove back into how her law firm was considering her for partner. The room followed her lead. That was the night it hit me. It wasn't that they didn't understand what I did. They didn't want to understand. To them, my world was invisible, therefore irrelevant. After dinner, I stood alone on the back porch, listening to the faint hum of the city beyond the estate walls. Amanda joined me, her heels clicking against the stone. She lit a cigarette, something she did only when she wanted to twist the knife. "You know, Jess," she said, blowing smoke into the night air, "you could have been more. You had the brains, the opportunities. You just chose the wrong path." No. I stared at her, the same sister who had mocked me for food stamps, who turned my combat scars into punchlines. "Maybe I chose a path you'll never understand," I said flatly. She smirked. "That's one way to spin it." Then she flicked ash off the railing and walked back inside like she'd won again. I stayed out there, gripping the railing until my knuckles went white. My chest felt heavy, not from her words, but from the realization that I was never going to get what I wanted from them. Respect. Not from Amanda, not from my parents. To them, I'd always be the one who didn't fit, the one who didn't shine in the right way. But deep down, a part of me smiled. Because while Amanda thought she had me cornered, I knew the truth. Every insult she threw only built more pressure, and pressure has a way of creating diamonds. When I left that night, my father barely shook my hand. My mom kissed my cheek distractedly. Amanda hugged me like she was embracing a loser at the finish line. But I walked to my car with my head up. I wasn't done, not even close. And as I drove away from the Monroe estate, the glow of their perfect chandeliers fading in the rearview mirror, I felt a strange calm. They could underestimate me all they wanted. The real battles I was fighting weren't in dining rooms or over birthday cakes. They were in the shadows, where winning meant no one even knew I'd been there. And in that silence, I was just getting started. I walked back into the operations center the next week, the glow of monitors washing the room in blue light, and something felt different. The chatter was sharper, the tension heavier. Overnight, we'd intercepted chatter about a large-scale cyber operation, something that made even the most seasoned analysts sit straighter. I slid into my chair, scanning the incoming reports. A foreign group was probing not just one system, but dozens across critical infrastructure hospitals, airports, even parts of the power grid. It wasn't random. This was coordinated. "Jessica, your lead on this one," my supervisor said without preamble, dropping a thick file on my desk. It wasn't a suggestion. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my face neutral. Got it. The next 72 hours blurred into one long fight. No bullets, no explosions, just endless streams of malicious code slamming against our defenses. My team barely left the room. We ate energy bars, chugged coffee, and took turns power napping on stiff chairs. I stared at packet flows until my eyes watered, but patterns started emerging. They were testing us, searching for weaknesses, and then I saw it, a subtle variation, hidden deep in the data, like someone slipping a needle into a haystack. "They're going after emergency response systems," I said, louder than I meant to. Heads whipped toward me. I walked them through the data. If they get in, they can shut down communications between hospitals, ambulances, even 911 call centers. They could make an entire city go dark in a crisis. That got attention. Orders came down fast, and suddenly I was briefing generals in secure conference calls, explaining the threat in plain English while the clock ticked. Nobody in that room cared where I went to school or what car I drove. All that mattered was whether I could stop the attack. We built countermeasures on the fly, patching vulnerabilities, rerouting traffic, isolating infected systems before the breach could spread. Every keystroke felt like pulling a pin from a grenade before it exploded. At one point, we thought we'd lost control of a hospital network in Chicago. I could almost hear Amanda's voice in my head. Still hiding behind a computer? Except this time, those keystrokes were the only thing standing between patience and chaos. At the 70th hour, we blocked the final breach attempt. The room erupted in cheers, fist bumps, hugs, even a few tears. We'd done it. No headlines would announce it, but millions of Americans would wake up safe, never knowing how close they'd come to disaster. Later that night, my supervisor pulled me aside. "Monroe, you just prevented a national crisis. The brass will want to know your name." I shrugged, exhausted. "As long as they know the teams." He smirked. "Don't play humble. There's talk of a commendation. Maybe more." The word hung in the air. Commendation. Medals were for firefights, not keyboards. But in that moment, I realized something. The battlefield had changed, and so had the definition of heroism. Of course, my family knew none of this. That weekend, I dragged myself to brunch at my parents' house. Amanda was in rare form, recounting her firm's latest victory with the same smugness she probably used in court. "They quoted my brief word for word," she said, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin like royalty. "And Jessica," my mom said sweetly, "how's the computer work?" The word computer dripped with dismissal, like I was still tinkering in a garage at 16. Amanda leaned in with her smile that was really a knife. Still saving the world one keyboard at a time? I wanted to laugh. 3 days earlier, I'd literally kept hospitals from shutting down. But sitting at that table, I let the silence do the talking. No one there would ever understand the weight of what I carried, and that was fine. Some battles don't need an audience. Back at Fort Meade, the recognition kept coming. I got pulled into high-level briefings, trusted with projects that carried more responsibility than some officers twice my rank. At one meeting, a general looked me straight in the eye and said, "Monroe, you saved lives. Don't think we don't know it." I nodded, but inside, a part of me froze. Saved lives. It was the same phrase they'd used after Afghanistan. Different battlefield, same result. And yet, my own family couldn't even muster a, "We're proud of you." Late one night, after another shift of chasing code, I sat alone in the parking lot, staring at my reflection in the car window. Amanda thought I was a failure. My parents thought I was drifting. But the U.S. military had just trusted me to guard the country from collapse. Which judgment mattered more? The answer was obvious. Still, the weight of family judgment clung like smoke. Every sneer from Amanda, every disappointed look from my father, they echoed in my head. But they didn't crush me. They sharpened me. Because deep down, I knew the silent war I was fighting was setting the stage for something bigger. Something even Amanda wouldn't be able to dismiss with a glass of wine and a smirk. And when that day came, they wouldn't see the family disappointment. They'd see what the Army already knew. A soldier who fought battles no one else could see and won. The invitations were printed on thick cardstock with gold lettering, the kind of thing my mother thought screamed class. Robert and Elaine Monroe celebrating 40 years of marriage. I got mine in the mail like everyone else. No phone call, no personal note. Just the expectation that I'd show up, sit at the far end of the table, and watch Amanda soak up the spotlight. For weeks, she'd been dropping hints in the family group chat. Photos of her new dress, shots of the caterer's menu, a snapshot of the engraved champagne flutes she'd helped Mom choose. It wasn't about the anniversary, it was about Amanda reminding everyone she was the face of the family. I kept my replies short. A thumbs up here, a sounds nice there. Truth was, part of me didn't want to go. I knew exactly what would happen. Amanda would find a way to take a swipe at me. My parents would stay silent, and I'd end up leaving early with that same pit in my stomach I'd carried since West Point. But another part of me knew I had to be there. Not for them, but for myself. I wasn't hiding anymore. The night before the party, Amanda called. That alone was unusual. She preferred her words to reach me secondhand, filtered through our parents. "Jess," she said, her voice sugar-coated but sharp underneath, "please don't embarrass Mom and Dad tomorrow. This is their night, not a place for your Army stories." I almost laughed. Embarrass them? The same parents who used to tell their friends Amanda was the pride of the family while introducing me as the other one? But I held my tongue. "Don't worry, Amanda. I wouldn't dream of stealing your thunder." She paused, caught off guard, then replied, "Good. Just wear something respectable." She hung up before I could answer. Respectable. To Amanda, that meant designer clothes and an expensive watch. To me, it meant showing up as myself. I laid out a simple navy dress, polished my boots, and set the Medal of Honor notification letter back into the drawer where I kept it hidden. The announcement was still under wraps, scheduled for the following week. Amanda had no idea. When I arrived at the estate, the driveway looked like a luxury car commercial. BMWs, Jaguars, a shiny Tesla all lined up in front of the house. My old Ford stuck out like a sore thumb, but I didn't care. I walked past the lineup, shoulders back, gift in hand. Inside, the air was thick with expensive perfume and forced laughter. My mother was glowing in pearls. My father looked like he'd stepped out of a country club brochure. And Amanda, of course, made her entrance in a red gown that screamed, "Look at me." "Jessica," my mother said, air kissing my cheek. "You made it." Her tone was surprised, as if she'd half expected me not to. My father shook my hand briefly before turning back to his guests. Amanda swooped in. "Jess, you came. Cute dress." Her eyes flicked over me, assessing like a TSA scanner. "Still shopping discount racks?" Bradley smirked behind her, already sipping from his second glass of champagne. I just smiled. "Still rehearsing your insults in the mirror?" For once, Amanda blinked. But she recovered quickly, turning her attention back to the crowd like I was background noise. Dinner was served in the grand dining room, candles flickering against polished silverware. I was placed at the far end of the table, near Uncle Charles, who fell asleep halfway through the salad course. Amanda and Bradley were, naturally, seated right next to my parents. Perfect symmetry, just how Amanda liked it. The conversation was predictable. Vacation homes, Ivy League admissions, Amanda's latest legal triumphs. When it was my turn, Bradley leaned across the table. "So, Jess, still working those long computer hours? Must be tough, living paycheck to paycheck." "0 lakhs." Amanda chimed in, her voice loud enough for the whole table. "Jess, are you still using food stamps? I mean, no judgment, well, not much, but it's just surprising at your age." The words landed like a grenade. My mother's fork froze midair. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Cousin Laura shifted uncomfortably. And Amanda? She leaned back, smirking like she'd just won another case. I set down my glass slowly, meeting her eyes. "Funny you should ask, Amanda. You might want to hold that thought." Her smile faltered, just a fraction. The storm was coming, and she didn't even see it yet. As the main course arrived, I let her keep talking. She bragged about Bradley's real estate investments, about her kids' elite schools, about her upcoming vacation to Italy. Every word dripped with the confidence of someone convinced they'd already won the game. What she didn't know was that the rules were about to change. Because the very next morning, while she was busy nursing a hangover and bragging to her friends about her perfect night, the Pentagon was scheduled to announce the Medal of Honor ceremony. My name, Jessica Monroe, would be broadcast across every news outlet in America. The family disappointment, the food stamp punchline, would be standing beside the President of the United States, receiving the nation's highest military honor. But for now, I stayed silent. I let Amanda bask in her spotlight one last time, because I knew soon enough her smirk would vanish, and when it did, there'd be no taking it back. The fork in Amanda's hand hadn't even reached her mouth when James, the butler, appeared at the dining room doorway. He looked more formal than usual, which said a lot considering he always carried himself like the Queen might drop by unannounced. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady but carrying weight. "A special delivery has arrived for Captain Jessica Monroe." Every head turned toward me. For a second, I thought he'd said Amanda's name out of habit. But no, he said mine loud, clear, and unmistakable. Amanda's eyebrows shot up, her smirk glued in place as though she couldn't imagine why I'd ever get special attention. James stepped aside, and another staff member walked in holding a sleek envelope stamped with the Pentagon seal. Not Amazon, not Bill's Pentagon. He handed it directly to me, ignoring Amanda's outstretched hand. I took it slowly, sliding a finger under the flap. The room had gone quiet. Even the clink of silverware had stopped. Amanda, unable to help herself, muttered, "What? Another notice about overdue payments?" A few polite chuckles rippled across the table, though thinner than usual. I pulled out the letter and unfolded it, the thick paper heavy in my hands. My eyes skimmed the bold header. Office of the Secretary of Defense, official notification. I read silently for a few moments, then looked up. The silence was crushing, every eye waiting for me to stumble. Instead, I set the letter neatly on the table where everyone could see. "Tomorrow morning," I said calmly, "the President will be awarding me the Medal of Honor for actions in Afghanistan and my continued service at U.S. Cyber Command." It was like I detonated a bomb in the middle of the table. My father's wine glass froze halfway to his lips, his face draining of color. My mother gasped, her perfectly polished hand flying to her pearls. Cousin Laura nearly dropped her dessert spoon. And Amanda's smirk collapsed like a cheap tent in a thunderstorm. "You're joking," she finally said, her voice sharper than broken glass. I gestured toward the letter. "Read it yourself." "No." Bradley leaned forward, eyes scanning the seal, the signature, the words, "Medal of Honor." His jaw tightened, his lawyer brain already calculating the fallout. Amanda, meanwhile, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. But that's impossible," she stammered. "They don't just hand those out. That's for real heroes, not—" She cut herself off, realizing too late how far she'd gone. "Not what?" I asked evenly. She fumbled, her face turning a shade of red no amount of foundation could cover. Not people like you. The words hung in the air like a noose. My father finally set his glass down, spilling a splash of wine onto the white linen tablecloth. Jessica, he said, voice strained. Is this legitimate? I leaned back in my chair, arms folded. The Pentagon doesn't send fake letters, Dad. The weight of it settled in. For years, I had been the disappointment, the failure, the charity case. And in one unshakable moment, that narrative shattered. Amanda tried to recover, pasting on a brittle smile. Well, I suppose congratulations are in order. Her tone made it sound more like a sentence than a compliment. But I didn't let her off the hook. You know, Amanda, I said, my voice calm but cutting, a child shouldn't have to earn the Medal of Honor just to get respect from her own family. That landed harder than anything else. My mother flinched. My father looked down at his plate. Even Bradley didn't dare speak. James, still standing in the doorway, gave the faintest nod in my direction before excusing himself. For once, I felt like someone in this house actually understood. Conversation stumbled back to life after a long pause, but the tone had shifted. My parents' friends whispered to each other at the far end of the table, sneaking glances at me as though they were recalibrating everything they thought they knew. Cousin Laura peppered me with nervous questions about Afghanistan, about Cyber Command, about what exactly the medal meant. Amanda sat stiff and silent, her eyes darting between me and the letter as though sheer disbelief might rewrite the words. By dessert, the atmosphere had curdled. My father tried to raise a toast to Jessica, for her achievement, but the words rang hollow. My mother added something about sacrifice, but quickly changed the subject to Amanda's children. It was almost laughable. They couldn't decide whether to be proud or horrified. Amanda finally broke her silence as the plates were being cleared. You should have told us, she snapped. Springing this on everyone, like some spectacle? That's manipulative. I tilted my head. You mean like all those times you announced my food stamps at Thanksgiving? Or reminded everyone I wasn't married yet? That kind of spectacle? Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. For once, Amanda had no comeback. The room fractured after that. Some relatives drifted toward me, suddenly eager to talk. Others stayed glued to Amanda, unwilling to let go of the hierarchy they'd clung to for decades. My parents looked like they'd aged 10 years in one evening, trying to process the fact that their disappointment daughter was about to be honored on national television. I stood, thanking James as he brought my coat. Congratulations again, Captain, he said quietly, with more sincerity than anyone else in the house. Walking out into the cool night air, I could still feel the silence I'd left behind. It wasn't the silence of dismissal anymore. It was the silence of people realizing they'd misjudged me all along and knowing nothing would ever be the same. The night after the dinner, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, voicemails, texts stacked on top of each other like a bad comedy routine. By morning, it wasn't just family. It was neighbors, old classmates, even reporters trying to get a comment. The Medal of Honor announcement had gone live at midnight, and suddenly my name was plastered everywhere from CNN to the local paper. I ignored most of it, sipping burnt coffee in my tiny kitchen while scrolling through the headlines. From food stamps to Medal of Honor, Captain Jessica Monroe, the hero her family overlooked. Some journalist had already dug up Amanda's little food stamp jab from an old Facebook post. Seeing it quoted under a photo of my face on the news made me laugh out loud. Karma had a twisted sense of humor. But the real storm was my family. My mom left me 3 voicemails in a row, her voice high-pitched and frantic. Jessica, call me back immediately. The press is calling. We need to discuss how to respond. My father's text was blunt. Call me. Urgent. Amanda's messages came last. We need to talk. Now. Then another. You ambushed us. I sat back, letting the phone buzz on the counter. For years, they had dismissed me, silenced me, laughed at me. Now they couldn't stop chasing me. When I finally answered, it was my mother. Jessica, she began, already on edge. Why didn't you tell us? We were blindsided. The neighbors are calling, the country club won't stop asking questions. I cut her off. This wasn't about you, it never was. Silence. Then, softer. We're proud of you. Truly. But the way it came out, don't you think it makes the family look unprepared? There it was. Not proud of me for what I did. Proud because now they could polish the family image. Amanda called next. I answered on the third try. Her voice was tight, almost brittle. You humiliated me. I laughed. Really? I thought you were doing fine at that yourself. This isn't funny, Jess. Do you have any idea how I looked? Sitting there while everyone stared at me like I was the fool who didn't know my own sister? Maybe because you were too busy mocking me to ever ask what I was actually doing with my life. Amanda's breathing hitched. For the first time, she didn't have a ready comeback. You should have told me, she managed finally. Why? I shot back. So you could spin it before I walked in the room? So you could make it about you, like always? She went quiet, then whispered, You enjoyed this, watching us underestimate you. I didn't deny it. A little. But you know what I enjoyed more? Realizing your opinion doesn't matter anymore. Then I hung up. The calls kept coming, but I stopped answering. Instead, I went into work. At Fort Meade, nobody cared about Amanda or her bruised ego. The only thing that mattered was the mission. My teammates clapped me on the back, offered congratulations, and then we all went back to monitoring threats. Simple. Honest. No judgment except whether you did your job right. By the weekend, though, I couldn't avoid the family forever. My parents invited me to brunch, just the immediate family, my mom promised. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. The atmosphere in the dining room was different. Quieter, almost reverent. My father cleared his throat as I sat down. Jessica, he said stiffly, we underestimated you. That was a mistake. Amanda sat across from me, her jaw tight. You made us all look like idiots, she muttered. I looked at her calmly. No, Amanda, you did that yourself. I just stopped helping you hide it. Her cheeks flushed, but before she could snap back, I leaned forward. A child shouldn't need a Medal of Honor to earn her family's respect. That line landed harder than anything else I'd said. My mom's eyes watered. My father looked away. Amanda sat frozen, her fork untouched. For once, I let the silence hang. Let them sit in it. Brunch limped on, with strained small talk and half-hearted questions about the ceremony. My parents tried to soften things, suggesting we move forward as a family. Amanda stayed icy, stabbing at her food like it was my fault the eggs were overcooked. When I stood to leave, Amanda followed me out onto the porch. Her voice was lower now, less sharp. I'm sorry, she said, forcing the words out like they burned her throat. Some of the things I said, over the years, maybe I went too far. Maybe? I raised an eyebrow. She exhaled, crossing her arms. Fine. I was cruel. But you could have told me. I shook my head. No, you never earned the right to know. You made sure of that. Her eyes flicked away, and for the first time in decades, Amanda looked small. As I walked to my car, my father called after me, Jessica, the press will want family quotes. We should coordinate. I didn't even turn around. Handle your own quotes. I've already handled enough. Driving away, I felt the weight of years lifting. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking in their house, swallowing my words while Amanda made jokes at my expense. The fallout was theirs to deal with now. I had bigger battles to fight, and this time, the whole world knew which side I was on. The White House lawn looked nothing like the battlefields I'd known, but my nerves buzzed the same way they had before stepping out on patrol. Rows of chairs faced the podium, press cameras lined up like artillery, and Secret Service agents scanned every corner with eyes sharper than snipers. The Medal of Honor ceremony was a national production, and today I wasn't hiding behind screens or uniforms. I was front and center. They led me to a seat in the front row, the weight of my dress blues heavy on my shoulders. Every ribbon, every badge, every scar under the fabric reminded me of how I'd gotten here. Around me, generals in starched uniforms whispered to aides. A string quartet played softly, completely out of place for someone who'd once lived on MREs and 2 hours of sleep. My parents sat 3 rows back, stiff and silent. Amanda was beside them in a designer suit, her smile frozen like she was auditioning for a toothpaste ad. The cameras would catch her face too, and she knew it. She'd never admit it, but part of her was furious this spotlight wasn't hers. The announcer's voice cut through the murmurs. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. Everyone stood. The president walked out, calm, confident, the most powerful person in the world, and today, he was here to talk about me. He began with the official remarks, my actions in Afghanistan dragging Private Lopez out of the kill zone despite being wounded myself. My years at Cyber Command, identifying and blocking attacks that could have crippled entire cities. Each line hit harder than the last because none of it was family gossip, none of it was spin, it was the truth, documented and undeniable. Captain Jessica Monroe, the president said, turning toward me, your courage on the battlefield and your dedication in the shadows have saved countless American lives. On behalf of a grateful nation, it is my honor to present you with the Medal of Honor. The world slowed as he pinned the medal on my uniform. The cameras clicked like gunfire. The ribbon felt light, but the weight behind it was enormous. Applause thundered. Strangers stood for me. Soldiers I'd never met saluted. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need Amanda's approval, or my father's acknowledgement, or my mother's polite silence. This country had just given me its highest honor. That was more than enough. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed. Microphones shoved toward my face. Captain Monroe, what does this award mean to you? I kept it simple. It means sacrifice matters. It means the quiet fights matter just as much as the loud ones. And it means the soldiers who never came home deserve this moment more than I do. It wasn't rehearsed, but it landed. The reporters nodded, scribbling furiously. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Amanda staring at me, lips pressed thin. At the reception inside, I shook hands with cabinet members, senators, even celebrities who wanted a photo. My father hovered nearby, trying to look like he belonged. At one point, he introduced himself to a general as Jessica's father, of course, his voice thick with sudden pride. My mother repeated the story of how I always loved computers, as if she hadn't rolled her eyes for years. Amanda approached with a champagne flute, her expression carefully curated for the cameras. Congratulations, Jess, she said through clenched teeth. Really, you deserve it. I raised an eyebrow. Wow. That almost sounded sincere. I callowed. She forced a laugh, glancing around to make sure no one heard. You know this changes things, right? People are going to look at us differently now. We'll be associated with… Stop. My voice was low, sharp enough to cut through her fake smile. This isn't about you. It never was. Her face tightened, but before she could answer, another wave of officials pulled me away. For once, she wasn't the center of attention. She was background noise. That night, when the media replayed the ceremony on every channel, I didn't sit with my family. I sat alone in my apartment, medal still resting on my uniform, watching the world see me for who I was, not who Amanda painted me to be. The anchors called me a hero. The newspapers ran headlines about my quiet bravery. Meanwhile, Amanda was probably staring at her reflection, realizing the one thing she couldn't outshine was reality. The Medal of Honor didn't erase the years of being overlooked, of being mocked at the dinner table, of food stamp jokes delivered with a smile. But it shifted the ground beneath us. For the first time, Amanda wasn't the only Monroe worth mentioning, and judging by the way she looked at me during that ceremony, she knew it. I took off the medal, setting it gently on the table. My scars still ached. My bank account wasn't as flashy as Amanda's, and my family's approval was still conditional at best. But none of that mattered anymore, because the public eye had seen me not the failure, not the disappointment, not Amanda's shadow. They'd seen Jessica Monroe, soldier, survivor, and now, Medal of Honor recipient. And that was something no smirk, no jab, no silence at the dinner table could ever take away. The weeks after the Medal of Honor ceremony felt like stepping into a different universe. Invitations poured in. Interviews, panel discussions, speaking engagements. Suddenly, everyone wanted to hear from the quiet soldier who shocked her own family. It was surreal, but I wasn't interested in basking in the spotlight. I wanted to channel it into something real. That's how the Freedom Shield Foundation was born. I seeded it with my own money, no strings attached, and built a team dedicated to supporting female veterans. Not just photo ops, but housing, counseling, career training, the stuff I wish I'd had when I came home with scars, both visible and invisible. I wanted women who had served to know they weren't invisible, no matter what their families or communities thought. The launch event was modest, no chandeliers, no pearls, just a room full of veterans, advocates, and volunteers. When I spoke, I kept it direct. Too many of us come home to silence. Too many of us get told we don't measure up, even after we've risked everything. This foundation exists to prove otherwise. The applause that followed wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was raw, and it mattered more to me than any headline. Of course, the Monroes couldn't ignore it. My mother showed up at the opening gala, pearls intact, telling anyone who would listen that she was so proud of her daughter's vision. My father gave a speech about the importance of leadership, as if he'd been coaching me all along. Amanda arrived late, heels clicking on the floor like she owned the place, and hugged me in front of cameras. "I just want you to know how impressed I am," she said loudly, for the microphones. Then, quieter through clenched teeth, "You've really flipped the script on me, haven't you?" I smiled for the cameras. "No, Amanda, I've written my own script." Behind the flashbulbs, though, there were shifts happening. My father started calling me more not to lecture, but to ask for advice. He still carried that Monroe pride, but it was softer now, laced with respect he couldn't fake. My mother began asking questions about Cyber Command, not dismissively but curiously, like she was finally trying to understand what I did. It was late, but it was something. Amanda was trickier. She tried apologies in half measures. "You know, Jess, I may have been a little harsh over the years. I only pushed you because I thought you were capable of more." "Pushed?" I said flatly. "You mocked. You belittled. Don't rewrite it." She bristled, but didn't deny it. For once, she had no clever spin. That was new. Still, she couldn't let go of control completely. At family dinners, she'd steer conversations toward her firm, her kids, her vacations. But the dynamic had changed. When she took shots at me now, they landed flat. Cousins asked me about the foundation. Uncles wanted to hear about the ceremony. Even my parents corrected Amanda when she made a jab too sharp. One night, after a particularly icy dinner where Amanda tried to dismiss my foundation as charity work, I pulled her aside. "Listen," I said, keeping my voice low. "We can either build a healthier relationship, or we can keep playing this game. But here's the truth. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your validation. So if you want to stay in my life, it's going to be on equal terms. No more courtroom cross-examinations at dinner. No more smirks. You either respect me, or you keep your distance." She stared at me, stunned. For the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes, not just irritation, but real doubt. She wasn't sure how to play this version of me. The balance had shifted, and she knew it. Outside of family, the foundation thrived. We launched mentorship programs pairing young veterans with leaders in tech, law, and government. We built emergency housing for women at risk of homelessness. We secured partnerships with universities that offered scholarships to female vets. For once, I wasn't just reacting to the past. I was building the future. Every time I stood at a podium or cut a ribbon on a new program, I thought about those nights at Amanda's table, her food stamp jokes, my parents' silence, the sting of being overlooked. And I realized something important. Revenge isn't about crushing someone else. It's about proving to yourself that their definition of you was never the truth. Amanda tried, once more, to reclaim the narrative. At a fundraiser, she introduced me to one of her law partners. "This is my sister Jessica. She's done some impressive work lately. I always knew she had it in her." I didn't let it slide. I smiled at the partner, then looked back at Amanda. "That's not true. You never believed in me. You told me I was wasting my life. But thanks for the rewrite." The law partner laughed awkwardly. Amanda flushed, but she said nothing. The dynamic had changed too much for her to hold the gavel anymore. For years, I had been the underdog at every family event, shrinking while Amanda basked. Now, the scales had evened. Not because of the medal, not because of the foundation, but because I finally stopped letting their opinions weigh me down. I set boundaries. I demanded respect. And slowly, they adjusted. Not perfectly. Amanda still slipped, still rolled her eyes when I talked about my work. My father still measured success in dollars and titles. My mother still worried more about appearances than substance. But the days of me being their punchline were over. And as I drove home from another foundation meeting one evening, the medal resting in its case on my shelf, I realized I didn't crave their approval anymore. I didn't need it. The balance had shifted for good. The Arlington sky was gray that morning, the kind of muted light that softens even the sharpest marble. Rows of white headstones stretched endlessly, each one a story cut short, each one a reminder that my medal wasn't just mine, it belonged to all of them too. I walked slowly, the weight of my uniform familiar now, my boots crunching against the gravel path. The Medal of Honor rested against my chest, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt earned, not just by me, but by every soldier whose name I still carried in my head. I stopped at the grave of Sergeant Miller, the man who taught me how to keep my rifle clean and my head clearer. He never made it back from Afghanistan. I traced the letters on his stone with my fingertips and whispered, "This one's for you." Behind me, I heard footsteps. It wasn't Amanda. It was one of the young women from the Freedom Shield Foundation. She'd been homeless 6 months earlier, abandoned after her service, invisible to everyone except the system that failed her. Now she wore a blazer and held a binder full of plans for her next semester in college. "You okay?" she asked gently. I smiled. "Yeah, just making sure the right people get remembered." That was the thing. The medal, the press, the applause, they were fleeting. What mattered was what you did after. For me, that meant continuing the fight. Not the loud kind with rifles and explosions, not the silent cyber battles behind screens, but the fight to give veterans a life worth living after the uniforms came off. The foundation had grown faster than I imagined. We had offices in 3 states, a hotline running 24/7, and partnerships that actually put resources where they were needed. Every success story felt like a small victory. Housing a mother and her kids, getting someone into therapy before they broke, helping another vet land their first real job, those wins meant more than any applause at the White House. Of course, the family still played their roles. My father loved to mention me at the country club now, his hero daughter. My mother bragged to her friends about the foundation as if it had been her idea all along. And Amanda, she hovered on the edges, careful with her words. She'd stopped with the cheap shots, but the envy lingered in her eyes whenever people praised me. One night after a foundation gala, she pulled me aside. "Jess, listen. I know I wasn't kind. I know I made things harder for you. But maybe we could start fresh?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The flawless dress, the perfect makeup, the carefully curated image that had always mattered more to her than anything else. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. "I don't need a fresh start with you, Amanda," I said softly. "I just need honesty. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to respect me. But stop pretending. That's all I ask." She blinked, caught between pride and shame, then nodded once. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was real, and that was enough. As for me, I stopped measuring myself against their approval. I had soldiers who looked up to me, women who counted on me, and a nation that had trusted me with its highest honor. That was the validation that mattered. Family drama would always be there, simmering under the surface, but it no longer defined me. On the anniversary of my medal ceremony, I stood again at Arlington, this time speaking at a public event. The crowd was full of veterans, families, kids waving flags too big for their hands. I kept my words short. "Success isn't the sweetest revenge," I told them, my voice steady. "Honor Island honor earned through sacrifice, lived on your own terms. That's what lasts." The applause rolled over me like a wave, but I didn't need it. I'd already said what I needed to say. When the crowd dispersed, I stayed behind, walking the rows of headstones. Some names I recognized, most I didn't, but I felt connected to all of them. This was the real measure, not the medals, not the speeches, but the quiet truth that we had all stood up when it mattered. And as the sun broke through the clouds, casting light across the stones, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Because no matter what Amanda said, no matter how my parents wavered, no matter how many dinner tables had turned into battlegrounds, the final word was mine, and it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about honor, above all. I left Arlington that afternoon with the medal tucked back into its case, the echo of my own words still hanging in the air. For years, I thought the fight was about proving Amanda wrong, about forcing my parents to see me the way I saw myself. But standing among those graves, I realized I'd already won the only battle that mattered. The family dinners, the cheap jokes, the silence when I needed them most. None of it defined me anymore. What defined me was the choice to keep showing up, to serve when it was easier to quit, to fight battles no one else could see, to build something lasting for those who came after me. Amanda would always be Amanda, polished and restless, chasing validation like it was oxygen. My parents would always care too much about appearances. But me? I had finally learned that respect doesn't come from them. It comes from living a life that can stand on its own, no matter who doubts you. The sweetest revenge was never about success. It was about knowing I had carried myself with honor, through scars, through silence, through every room where I was underestimated. And that's the story I'll keep living on my own terms. For as long as I draw breath,